Oregon Congressman Bentz is back this week. As the only Republican in the Oregon congressional delegation, Congressman Bentz is in the unique position of being the only R in a blue state, but in the majority in Washington, D.C. Congressman Bentz represents one of the largest congressional districts in the nation. That's Oregon District 2, which is essentially all of Eastern Oregon and a majority of Southern and Central Oregon. Congressman Bentz, welcome back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Great to be with you, Ken.
You've introduced legislation called the Dalles Watershed Development Act, which passed the House on Tuesday. Briefly, it would transfer 150 acres of the Mount Hood National Forest from the federal government to the city of the Dalles for water system enhancements. Why does the city of the Dalles need this, and why did you propose this legislation?
Well, the city of the Dalles is growing, and their little reservoir, located about an hour and a half from town, by the way, because I got to drive up there and look at the reservoir, and their challenge is having enough space behind their dam to hold enough water to make the investment they're going to have to make in the pipeline and everything else worthwhile. So currently the reservoir is partially on Forest Service land, so they have a lease of sorts that gives them the right to flood a small amount of land. And this bill would add in about 150 acres, or exactly 150 acres. That includes that which is now getting inundated, and then some additional space. But they need more water for their future. There's no doubt about that. This would just about, I want to say, triple the size of their reservoir, and to go from about 1,200 acre feet up to something closer to 3,000.
Google has 5 data centers in the Dalles, and Google uses a lot of water to cool down those data centers. So how does this bill balance Google's demands with the municipal needs of the city?
I really have no idea. That was not an issue that came up in any of my discussions with the folks that are there. My understanding is that the water that Google has is coming from a number of different sources, and I want to say wells and perhaps the Columbia River, but I honestly don't know. But I did not hear that this water was being used for anything other than city purposes. But frankly, you'd have to ask the city that question.
Which I did. And I talked to them about that, and they said directly that this is not related to Google. But indirectly, you look at the numbers. In 2020, Google used 355 million gallons of water. That's about 29% of the total water consumption in the Dalles. So this has to do with the overall water consumption of that area, and making sure that the city of the Dalles has enough water for their 16,000 residents. So indirectly, this has something to do with Google, but only in the overall sense of the water needs of that total region. Is that how you understand it?
Well, I have, as I said earlier, no idea what the allocation of the water that will be stored behind this expanded dam will be used for. I have no idea. But that's going to be left up to the city to determine, and working with its residents and figure that out. I don't think it's a bad thing to have more water stored behind this dam, because it's necessary for all kinds of really good reasons, including, I would guess, Google. But again, that's up to the city to determine how they're going to allocate that water. But why in the world, when the city is reliant upon taxes that Google pays and jobs that Google provides, they wouldn't take this into account is beyond me. I'm sure they will, but who knows? I'm glad you talked to them.
Google employs about between 150 and 200 people in the Dalles. So that's not a lot of employment, but the taxes that come from those data centers does make a big difference for their bottom line. Opponents of the bill are concerned about the impact of the environment on the environment and wildlife because of this. Do you share any of those concerns?
Well, I wouldn't know what they are. It'd be great if they would contact my office and share them. But nothing was said about wildlife being impacted, did you check the number of acres that are in that particular national forest? Because
Now,
it's in the thousands, if not the tens of thousands. And
right.
so to suggest that 150 acres are going to make a difference, a portion of which are already covered by water, it seems to me a little bit just totally unbalanced. Speaking of unbalanced. And so I would just say, of course, we're concerned about the environment, but I think we also have to be concerned about people. And we got to make sure that they have the water they're going to need. We have to be concerned about our communities and make sure that they have the water they need for their businesses. You know, businesses are fleeing Oregon now because of the anti-business attitude of frankly, the leaders in Salem and Portland toward business. And that's why we're having such a difficult time keeping the ship of state afloat in Salem. Yeah, I mean it. The attitude of the folks that have been running government in Salem and in Portland for many, many years has been totally anti-business. Why they would do this when it's taxes from business that pay for a lot of the stuff that goes on is beyond me. And I know the Democrats are starting to realize this, because the governor, in her announcement that she was going to run again, actually had the courage to say, hey, we got to do something about business. Now, she's about 10 years late, but at least she's doing it. And the same is true for some of the legislators that are on the Democrat majority side.
Coming back to the Dalles, though, I want to keep this specific to the issue that we're talking about right now.
Okay.
This is region specific.
You're not letting me answer, which is unsettling. But you go ahead, ask your question.
I did let you answer, Congressman. I just want to keep this region specific to your district. There's a larger national question here regarding stewardship of federal lands. Should national forest land be transferred to municipalities or sold off or leased for private development? Overall, in the general sense.
I think you and I discussed this before, but if we didn't, we should have. In the 6 months just passed, I think that a bill was brought that suggested that 4 million acres of public land be taken from the national, actually BLM land, I believe, and transferred to private or municipal use. I opposed that bill. I wrote an editorial actually opposing the bill. But in my editorial, I explained that land, millions and millions, 250 million acres, I think, in total, you can't simply starve your cities and starve your communities of that kind of land. You can't do it. It makes no sense. We have 250 million acres of federal land in the western United States, and if a city needs 150 acres, then of course the city should get it, and that's exactly what the folks here in Congress think. And by the way, I'm all in favor of public land, and that's why I wrote that editorial opposing the 4 million acre mandatory disposition, because I thought that's the wrong way to manage land.
You're also pushing, let's move on from that, the Secure Rural Schools Reauthorization Act. That provides payments to timber communities that are limited from harvesting on federal land. That also passed the House on Tuesday. What does that do, and how does that help your district?
It actually helps the entire state of Oregon. I think about 18 of the 36 counties, but I'm not sure exactly. And what it does is it says, as was said back in 2000 when the bill first passed, when the Endangered Species Act destroys communities and takes away timber revenues, as it did, right after the Endangered Species Act, or the owl was listed under the Endangered Species Act in 1980, or actually it was 1990, but the amount of timber being harvested plummeted by 80%. 80%. And the net result was huge damage to Oregon's communities, to its businesses, to its timber industry, from which it has never recovered.
Congressman Cliff Bentz, always a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for returning back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
I appreciate this opportunity, Ken. Thanks very much.
And we'll be right back.